Chapter 8 The Word of Sherlock Holmes. Now that Sherlock Holmes had told me where Jejune was hiding, I had to wait all day to find him. Waiting is always difficult, but this wait was a torment. Travis had returned and he was hiding in the willows at the back of the beach, which I took to mean he had also solved the mystery of the missing Jejune. To allay my nervousness and pass the time, I fixed a big breakfast and ate it when Mom came home. Later, to kill more time, I looked for butterfly caterpillars to raise. I found one I didn't know, a prickly red spine thing with yellow and black stripes. I picked the leaf it was feeding on and some others like it and put them in my bug cage. In a week or so, it would become a pupa, and some weeks or months later, an otherworldly butterfly. As it dried its wings in the air, I would look it up in my butterfly book, check it off on my checklist, and let it go. If I am lucky, I find butterfly eggs and watch from Act 1 to Act 4. When I lived in town, I used to pretend I was an egg, caterpillar, a chrysalis, and finally a butterfly. I would fly up into the air and soar out over the trees on my shimmering wings to unknown flowers and gardens. I haven't played that game since I came to the woods. I also found a tiny orchid that my book says is rare. Every time I poked among the trees and vines, I would find another amazing survivor in Gumbo Limbo hammock. James calls this spot our plant's last holdout against the invasion of people. I still had hours to go, so I joined Priscilla. She was refilling her minis with red sugar water. I held them while she poured. I also helped her hang them. While out in the pineland, she suggested we look at the Brazilian holly leaves. I wasn't ready to tell Priscilla where Jejune was hiding, so I went to the burrow pit with her. The leaves, of course, floated undisturbed on the scum. Busy as I tried to make myself, time nevertheless moved like a Florida gopher turtle. The day would not end, and Travis was putting two and two together. I left Priscilla mixing red vegetable dye and sugar water and went back to the hole to keep an eye on Travis. I wondered why he never came into the hammock. I was certainly glad he didn't, but it did seem odd that he had never put his foot in this beautiful place. Then I remembered he was an alligator hunter. Alligator hunters stay where alligators are, in the wetlands, and don't waste time in drylands. Just as a hammock is not an armadillo's niche, so it is not an alligator's or an alligator hunter's. Travis stayed in the dragon's niche, and as long as he did, we woods people were safe. For the next hour I read a book by the hole, then climbed the oak the better to spy on the hunter. He was walking toward the sawgrass prairie. I squealed joyously into my fists. If he was going there at this hour, he did not know where the old dragon was after all. At a clump of cabbage palms he sat down, and I smirked no more. He was watching the beach. He did know, and he had his gun out. I almost cried. Mom came home from her school. She looked for me in the tent, then up in the tree. I could see her face far down below between limbs and leaves. It was radiant. Something wonderful had happened. I had 1 hour to go. As swiftly as a lizard, I dropped from limb to limb and landed on the ground before her. "You got the job," I said. "Yes, I did. I start tomorrow. No more night work." She lifted her head proudly. "And it's even better than that. I'm manager of not one, but two diners. The boss is opening another at the north end of town." "Two?" I said in admiration. "You are a manager of two diners? Wow, Mom, you really are good. See, I told you so." "The house," she said without waiting for any more compliments. "I can buy the White House. The papers are not ready, but I want to leave here tonight. Pack up all your things." "Tonight?" I cried. This was a crushing disappointment. "Tonight," she answered. "A woman called the diner today and asked if you were home." Peggy answered. "She said she must be a social worker. The woman wanted to know where to find you. The rumor is you hobnob with the woods people." "What's wrong with that?" I said. "They're not fit company for a young girl," she answered, as if using someone else's words, but to my astonishment she seemed to mean them. "Mom," I cried, "what are you saying? You're talking about James, Priscilla, and Caruso. Mom, they're the gentlest people we have ever known, you and I." She did not look at me. "I have taken a room in a motel." She seemed so unlike herself, I wondered if my father was back. "Please, no, Mom. Let me stay here, at least tonight." "No," she said, and picked up a blouse to pack. "We must go. I want you out of here before we're caught." "Please, I've got to see Jejune before I go." She spun around to say no again, just as Sherlock Holmes flew from the oak tree to my shoulder. "Want to go out?" said the big, foot-tall parrot. Mom blinked and glanced from the bird to me and back to the bird. Then, unable to help herself, she smiled. Sherlock Holmes hung upside down from my shirt and eyed her. Well, thanks a lot, he said. The tension flowed out of Mom. Okay, she said. You'll be all right for another night? We'll stay. I had planned to give a farewell party until Peggy told me about that call. It makes me very nervous. Someone is tracking you down. No, no, I said, recalling the map room conversation. I know who made that call. I told her about Miss Clara Lee Dade and the maps and how I blurted out the diner for an address. I know it was Miss Dade calling, I said. Who else would think the diner is my home? She's interested in Gumbo Limbo hammock. I'm afraid she wants to see it. Mom listened, seemed to feel better, then slipped her arm around me and gave me a squeeze. Sherlock flew to the tent pole. Where did you get the parrot? She asked. He's wonderful. He must be a pet who got away, but now he lives in Gumbo Limbo hammock with the homeless. Mom tousled my hair and walked up to the parrot. I like you, pretty bird, she said. Sherlock Holmes bowed and lifted his silver-tipped gray feathers to show them off to her, then flew to my shoulder and clucked gently to me. He's my detective, I said. He gave me the missing clue to Dejeune's whereabouts. He did? Where is he? She asked. I can't tell you yet. Please do, Mom said. I want to thank him. In a roundabout way, Dejeune's responsible for my getting the job. She took her backpack down from a hook. He is? I said in astonishment. How could he be? It's all due to the salty water you found while searching for him, she answered. I told the owner of the diner about the salt in La Playa drinking water and suggested he use bottled water for the sake of the elderly. He made a few phone calls and found I was right. And guess what he said? You have the job? Better than that. 2 jobs. We smiled at each other. He also said, Mom went on, that my professor at school had highly recommended me. I was so happy for her I clapped, although I was not quite so happy for myself. I didn't want to leave the hammock ever, but I didn't want to leave my mother either. I wish we could both stay right here in the woods. That I knew now was impossible. So I took down my backpack and began folding my clothes. Liza Kay, Mom said, do you realize we can stop being afraid? I have a good job and we'll have a nice home. I straightened up and stared at her, thinking many thoughts. She opened her string bag and took out not just the daily container of soup and biscuits, but a large steak, a sack of potatoes, a bag of green beans, avocados, oranges, mangoes, and papayas. With this feast, she said, we celebrate. Go find James, Caruso, and Priscilla. I haven't seen anyone all day but Priscilla, I said. I think they're busy. I looked at the alarm clock. It was 6:30. 1/2 hour to go. I left Mom packing her clothes and crept to the water's edge to watch Travis. If he was going to shoot Dejeune, I would scream bloody murder and make him miss. To my surprise, Travis put his binoculars in their case and turned towards the trail. I couldn't believe it. Was he actually leaving? I closed my eyes and opened them. He had disappeared into the jungle. Absent-mindedly, I picked a flower and chewed its stem. I breathed shallow breaths. Then I heard Travis's car engine start, turn over, and move off, growing fainter and fainter. He was gone. I ran back to the tent. Mom, I said, my heart thumping a farewell fanfare to the alligator hunter. Travis doesn't know where Dejeune is. I thought he did, but I thought he was going to kill him tonight. But he doesn't know. He doesn't know. Skipping, I rounded the table, gathered 5 assorted plates, put them down in a circle on the ground, then sat on my rock and peeled the potatoes. I'll be ready to go tomorrow, I said as the peels wound in a spiral at my feet. Suddenly, the leather ferns rattled and James walked into view. He was smiling. The woods people certainly had had a good day today. Mom invited him to the celebration by simply sweeping her arms out over the feast and gesturing for him to sit down. Thank you, he said, and sat. Mom has a wonderful new job, I told him. Congratulations, he said with some sadness in his voice. You're a beautiful bird. I would swear James blushed as he looked at Mom. Then he saw she was eating a raw bean and could not have spoken. Quick as a weasel's, his eyes scanned the camp, fell on Sherlock Holmes, and stayed there. He grinned. Where did you get him, Liza Kay? I thought I detected a little bit of disappointment in his voice. He's a woods person, I said. Homeless? James asked. If you call a free bird homeless. With a warm smile, James offered the parrot his wrist. The bird stepped on it and they rubbed beak and nose. James knew about parrots as he did about all of nature. He talked to the bird in soft clucks and whistles. Hello, Jean, the parrot said distinctly. Want to go out? James threw back his head and laughed. Got a name for him? Sherlock Holmes. Why Sherlock Holmes? He said, then whipped around and looked at me. Where's Dejeune? I'll tell you when I've seen him. Give me a hint? No, I answered. I waited for him to beg me, but he did not. Instead, he stroked the parrot's beak with a crooked forefinger and turned to Mom. Energetically, he began telling her which of the canals that drained Silver City could be closed and which could not. But, he paused, there's one more thing. We can't close the canal over here until we know where the PCP is coming from. We don't want it seeping back into the ground. Any clues? Yes, a kid from the condos told us some men washed containers in the canal just north of where the fish died. I tested the water where they worked. It was heavily contaminated with PCP. I was listening. Sweeney? I asked. His plants along the canal. I hope not, he said. Have you seen Caruso this evening? I sucked in my breath. He's probably singing, I answered, then counted hours and breathed again. The timing was wrong for Caruso and Beef Bones to be guilty. At last the sun went down. The clouds turned pink, red, and turquoise blue. Then it was night. I left James talking to Mom about water and municipal wells and slipped off to Gumbo Limbo Hole. At Dejeune's beach, I climbed a tree that I had selected right after Sherlock Holmes had told me where Dejeune was. From its second limb, I could see the beach. Once more I waited, but not for long. The water parted without a sound. An oval black, keeled with scoots, rose silently into view. There was not a gurgle, not a splash, as Dejeune's head appeared, water pouring off it like a surfacing submarine. He came ashore and climbed swiftly up the beach. A dark shadow, he lowered himself on the sun-warmed sand and let the heat seep into his cold body. I was right. Dejeune was hiding under the water all day and coming out at night. He had reversed normal alligator behavior to keep from being killed. Hello, I whispered. I'm so glad to see you. After a long wait, the magnificent old dragon returned to the water, plowed some bladderwort weeds into the reeds, and came back with a garfish in his mouth. He smacked it with his lipless mouth, then tilted his head back. Gravity carried the food to his belly. Alligators can't swallow. I knew you had to be here, I said. There are no weeds in the hole. The fish are multiplying and the water is clear. Almost. There are a few batches of blue-green algae you'll have to remove. You were down in the pit during the day, weren't you? Down where it's so cold you didn't have to breathe as often. You changed into a night gator. That's where you went. I stayed in the tree until the moon came up and I could vaguely see the huge scoots, the great grinning mouth, and the popped eyes. Then I climbed down and went home. It was quite late. James was gone, Mom was asleep, and Priscilla's, Caruso's, and my raw steaks were sitting in the candlelight on the table. Caruso must be still singing, but it would be nice to wake up Priscilla and have a party. I wondered if I should. Yes, Priscilla was the dragon's poet, and whether she wrote down her poems or not, she should be the first to know that Dejeune was safe. I cooked our steaks, and taking the candle, made my way to Gumbo Limbo Grove. Priscilla was at her desk, arms folded upon it, her candle burning. She was watching the bats maneuver through the tree limbs in the moonlight. Priscilla, I whispered, Mom had a party. Why didn't you go? Liza Kay? She answered fearfully. Is that you? Yes, it's me. Oh, Liza Kay, come into my house. I stepped over an imaginary line and presented her with the steak and fruit. Just place them over there, she said, pointing to the stump, but also reaching out for them. I'm really not hungry. Neither am I. I sat beside her and picked up a knife. Hungrily, we both ate. Are you writing poems? I asked. Not since Dejeune disappeared. This is what I wanted to hear. So that's why her notebook was empty. She couldn't write without Dejeune. Well, then you can start again, I said. Dejeune is on his beach right now. I've found him. He hides by day and comes out at night. Holding her breath, Priscilla got to her feet. Show me, she said, taking my hand. Together we made our way to the beach, parted the trees that surrounded it, and looked down on the huge old Dejeune basking in the moonlight, warming himself as best he could on the sun-heated sand. He saw us, arose on his short legs, and pushed off into the water. No ripples or sound marked his departure. Presently we heard a loud splash and a slamming of teeth. 28 to 30 in the lower jaw, 30 to 40 in the upper jaw. A bird screeched and the water churned. The big gator rolled with its prey. Dear fellow, Priscilla said and turned away. We must leave him to his privacy. She gave me an icy hand and I led the way home on a footpath of moonlight. Will you make up more poems now? I asked. She squeezed my hand. If I can. What do you mean if you can? Dejeune is here. A social worker found me after you left. I was putting up hummingbird bottles in the field. I told her I knew you and your mom, but that didn't help. She's coming to take me to the shelter." I did not know what to say. Perhaps Priscilla could be helped like my father. Perhaps someone could talk to her about her fear of walls until she became peaceful and could live indoors in a comfortable apartment. Mom thinks that can happen. As far as I was concerned, she was wonderful just the way she was. "I'm glad Dejeune's all right," she said, and sat down on our wicker chair bed. "What will you do when the social worker comes to get you, Priscilla?" I asked. "I'll do just what Dejeune did. I'll turn into a night person." She patted my hand. "Liza Kay," she said softly, "how do you know Dejeune was up at night?" "A parrot told me," I said. "He's not only mimicked James mimicking Dejeune's roar, but he said night night." I chuckled. Priscilla smiled. "I don't think he knew what he was saying," I went on, "but I did." "I'm ready to sleep," she said, and I picked up the plates and tiptoed away. As I walked home, stepping on silver spots of moonlight, I thought about how frightened Priscilla would be in a place with 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor. I hoped someone would hold her hand and maybe keep our wicker chair outside in case she became panic-stricken. Anyone who has been hurt can understand Priscilla. I wiped my eyes and ran in and out of the magnificent trees. Inside the yellow tent, I listened for a long time to the frogs and crickets and thought about Priscilla, Dejeune, and incredible Gumbo Limbo hammock. Somehow all 3 must survive. At 5 a.m., while it was still dark as night, I climbed the oak. An enormous shadow slid down the alligator beach and disappeared into Gumbo Limbo Hole. 2 hours later, the sun came up. Travis arrived on the beach. Singing smugly to myself, I climbed down the tree. Now to find where Dejeune stayed by daylight. The mystery was not completely solved.